Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 5th of June 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish, and with me in the studio, I'm sure you've seen already, is John Hurst. Don't adjust your set. The scales are absolutely true. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
We will also be joined by David Scott by live video link to give us his north of the border exposure. And behind the technical desk today is Nick Green. Well, the weather cold and a bit gloomy. That's most of the reports that we're getting across the country. I don't think I'm going to dwell on that too much. Let's talk about some good news. And the good news for UK Column and many other people is that we have finally managed to get a politician to come onto UK Column News. The lady is Bethan Jenkins here from Plaid Cymru. She's a Welsh Assembly member, and a couple of days ago we did an interview with her about the Linda Lewis Neath Port Talbot child snatching case. That interview we will play in approximately 15 minutes or so. We've got some other news items to cover, but really tremendous news that that case has now caught the attention of an Assembly member. And that is a lady who is absolutely brave enough to stand up and be counted.
If I could comment, Brian, of course she doesn't need to be because she's got parliamentary privilege in the same way as members of the mainland Parliament have. The Bill of Rights covers it. Debates in Parliament show it not be impeached or questioned. So she's got the power and she's using it. So let's hope more MPs and more MEPs and Assembly members catch on.
I'll take your point. Okay, well, let's have a look at other matters that are happening. And one of the key ones, of course, is that George Osborne is now the hatchet man, further cutting budgets. We're just going to have a look at what he's been doing. But of course, the thing for us all to remember is that everything he's doing is based on a lie. The lie is that there is no money. Of course, this is complete nonsense, as the fraudulent international banks create money out of nothing. This could be solved with the Bradbury pound, but let's just have a look at what he's up to. So the Mail here saying that £500 million is cut from the defence budget, forms £3 billion in savings, and what sort of areas is he going for? Well, the Mail set this out very nicely. We've got transport, defence, big cuts to universities and education, justice, public health, local government. He's hammering everything, all on the basis that there is no money. Well, what sort of man is George Osborne? Let's remember, because he appeared in the national press, these were photographs of him in his early days with some fairly dubious young ladies, a lot of drink on the table, and many other people have said they believe that there were other substances on the table. Whether that's correct or not, of course, a lot of people picked up on the extraordinary live footage of George Osborne looking as if he was just about to fall unconscious or he'd been drinking. Some people have even said, was he off his head on drugs? This is the man that David Cameron has seen fit to make Chancellor, and the man who is now absolutely out to, I think, destroy many institutions in UK.
Well, just to give you a practical example, I noticed his local government cuts 230 million. Well, my researches are that Powys, the county where I live, has 302 million in reserve. Right. So perhaps I should write to the Chief Executive of Powys and say you should help Mr Osborne out.
This is a subject which has come up before. We are going to be talking about it, and you are the man at the moment who has been leading the investigation. But what we are learning is that public authorities across the country have been running two sets of books, the figures they make public, and these vast amounts of money that are held in reserve, which the public is simply not supposed to know about. If you think this is fiction, stay with us over the coming weeks as we work to take the lid off this. But very quickly, David, what's the situation now in Scotland? Sorry, now that SNP's got hold of finances in Scotland?
Oh, the SNP won't touch the finances in Scotland because then there would be nobody to blame. So we're just allowing the main financial decisions to be made in Westminster. And despite the fact that we were assured we could be completely independent in 18 months, to actually have fiscal independence, that's going to take years, maybe even decades. So there are many, many years of blaming other people for financial constraints still to come in Scotland.
Interesting stuff. And we're obviously going to be taking a deeper look with you towards the latter part of today's news about what is happening in Scotland. And I believe the term One Scotland is now beginning to come into the public domain.
Oh, yes. And fascinating from John there on matters of two sets of accounts. I didn't know any research had been done in this in the UK. I came across this in America, where a town suffered some calamity, and as a result, all the property holders were asked for additional money to be contributed to the coffers of the local government. And investigations showed that not only did they not need money, but if property taxes were reduced to zero, there were sufficient reserves to run the government for something like 25 years. So the request for more money quickly went away. It's very fascinating just what's going on there.
It's a new development. I pay credit to Peter Kroll. He's started the research off, and we're at an early stage, but the documents are public. And if you go to the BCG website, you'll see some accounts of our researches. It's the Section 151 Officer Council Tax and Fraud, Parts 1 and 2, and it's a work in progress.
And indeed, a lady has put in some very good freedom of information requests asking particular councils for that information.
Yes, indeed. There's a new innovation, BCG 10-minute briefings. So we've prepared some this past day to keep our supporters up to date, because without the supporters, we wouldn't get anywhere. And also to ask the supporters to assist in the research. So if you check the BCG website later in the day, there'll be a request for you to do some research about local councils. And the good news is you might be entitled to some money back, and then there's a method of claiming it as well. So it's in your interest.
Well, there we are. Dubious dealings by our local councils, all because, of course, money is being hidden from the public, or, as we've just said, George Osborne cutting back. Now, we will have a look at the other areas he's going for, of course, many emotive ones, from the NHS to education, but we are going to come back and focus on defence. And the reason for this, of course, is to remember that David Cameron and his team are busy ramping up the rhetoric for war or some form of conflict with Russia. But remarkably, at the same time, we are cutting back on our own defences. Now, why is he doing this? We believe it's simply to drive UK into the arms of the European army, the European military structure. We can't do that if Britain's own military is too strong. So what we're witnessing is the Conservative drive to reduce our army, military as a whole, rather, to self-defence force, and it can then be manipulated. So we've got 1.8% to be cut off Britain's defence budget. At the same time, we've got this going on, which is very high-level meetings of not only US officials, but people from UK and the EU. They're meeting in Stuttgart, Germany, to analyse America's handling of Russia over the past 18 months. What I would guess is going on here is, of course, Russia has absolutely refused to back down to what has been a pretty bellicose approach by the US and the West, led, of course, by David Cameron in particular. So Russia refuses to back down. Now we get a meeting of officials saying, oh dear, what are we going to do now? Doesn't seem to be a lot of reporting on this meeting at the moment. Will we hear anything? Well, we don't know. Meanwhile, thank you very much to the gentleman who kindly sent us this. It's a YouTube talk that Brigadier General Peter B. Zwack did. Now, he was former defence official and defence attaché at the US Embassy in Moscow. And this man has been saying some remarkable things. He's saying that he is very, very concerned about the aggressive policy against Russia being played out at the moment. And he says that one of the key things that should be happening is, far from troops being moved up to the Russian border. There should be a stand back of forces on both sides, and coupled with that, there should be proper dialogue between the West and Russia, in particular, with proper involvement of senior military people. Now, this is one of the continuing themes that the UK column has been hearing over the last few weeks, that Britain's senior military personnel are simply now pushed in the background. David Cameron and his defence staff don't want to talk to the heads of the Army, Air Force and Navy. And indeed, some of those senior officers are saying that more or less they're being treated as dirt by very junior civil servants. So if we can put that one back on screen, Nick, we thought we'd just show you really some of the men that seem to be controlling Parliament, really. There's only two of them. The people we're speaking about are Oliver Letwin and Francis Maude. And what makes these men special is that they've got an iron grip over Britain's Cabinet Office, and the Cabinet Office is simply taking control of all other government departments. So these two names keep coming up, a lot of disquiet amongst Britain's senior military, that these men are not paying any attention to the professional knowledge and skills of those top brass. They're simply saying we're in control and we are going to enact our own policy.
My concern about this is the surrounding Russia with NATO forces, of course, cuts the response time if from the Russians' point of view. And increases the danger of an accidental World War III. It's also in breach of various treaties that have been enforced for many years. And there's also a poor tactic because it works both ways. If our forces are right up against the German border, they can zap us as quickly as we can zap them. As far as taking on the Russian forces, I never thought I'd say it, but if you were to check out the videos of May Day and the 70th anniversary of the Great Patriotic War, as the Russians call them, amateurs taught. I was a territorial army officer many years ago, so I've got some knowledge of this. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. So look at Red Square, look at the large number of keen, efficient soldiers, and the hardware. And the other thing to look at is the relation between Mr. Putin and his population, his armed forces. I've acted as an outer bodyguard for senior politicians, including prime ministers, and the one thing they're terrified of is contact with the public. Mr. Putin is completely different. He doesn't appear to be surrounded by bodyguards. He mingles with people. He shakes hands. He sheds tears with veterans of World War II and that sort of thing. So he's a leader, and that's not what we've got here, is it?
No, we've got something very different at work. Now, sticking on the fact there's an agenda running at the heart of this very devious Conservative government, we're going to come back on the subject of British Aerospace. This is just a screenshot from their website. Now, we've made the point before, we could discuss the right and wrongs of the military-industrial complex, but we're talking about something different here. We've got informed sources that are saying to us that basically there's a scam going on. The Conservative Party knows that if it pushes through these draconian cuts, there's already a falling order book for British Aerospace. And I am being told that the deliberate objective of this government is to completely undermine British Aerospace's order book and therefore make them vulnerable to a hostile takeover. And the significance of this is it would simply rip the heart out of Britain's defence industry. Coupled with the cuts in frontline troops, we would not have the ability to defend ourselves.
Well, cutting BAE means we have no surge capacity, because the basic logistic principle used to be stores were stocked up and kept in reserve and then rotated, and now they rely on so-called last-minute ordering and surge capacity and that sort of thing, and it's all being whittled away.
Yeah. So serious stuff going on in the background, from relationships with Russia to what's happening with our armed forces and procurement. Let's have a look here at what the Daily Mail seems to think is important. So a massive article, In Heels, the Army Captain Born a Man, transgender British soldier 27 poses in glamorous photo shoots as she reveals the battle she faced from an early age. So there's a picture there of our army soldier. This is what she looks like now as an officer. And we'd just like to point out that against the very serious background we've just discussed, the Daily Mail has given 26 paragraphs, 7 major photographs, and a video to what is clearly promoting a political transgender agenda. So we're not getting drawn into the needs of people for this. What we're looking at is that we have got a political agenda here to promote something. And what a shame that the Daily Mail can't put the same effort into actually reporting on the plight of the injured, unemployed and homeless military veterans. So this is where Britain's press becomes ever more interesting. Are they really reporting news, or are they simply pushing forward what is a political agenda? We think it's the latter. And certainly Britain's press doesn't want to say too much on the story of child abuse. So we've stuck with the Mail here. They're back on investigations in Jersey. We're apparently led to believe that 13 people are now in the spotlight. We just say, look at the language being used. If you can read that on screen, it's all historic. There's no hint that there's any child abuse going on in recent times. It's all back 40 years ago, 30 years ago. It's all around allegations, and it's all around celebrities and the famous. So pretty twisted language. I believe that the objective of these articles is to make people think it's something that all took place a while ago. Don't worry your little heads about it. I'll just cover the other two, and David, I'll just give you a quick slot.
Okay, can I just slip in?
Indeed.
I don't often tell jokes. British prisons are like holiday camps. They're full of 70s celebrities. 70s entertainers. There we go.
Well, there's no answer to that, really. Let's look at this one. This is the BBC. Well, we've got Norfolk paedophile ring case. It says police investigating social workers. Do we believe that? Well, the evidence is always contrary. 6 women and 4 men deny playing any part in the sexual abuse in Norfolk. Norwich Crown Court was told 2 Norfolk County Council social workers were alleged to have brackets tidied up documents. Now, we've been talking about fraud, corruption, perjury in the family courts as a result of social workers. Here we've got the new phrase tidied up. Gail Bernard, a senior social worker at Norfolk County, told the court the children had described being abused at sex parties and rewarded with certificates saying secrets are good, don't tell anyone. But this was the bit that caught my eye. The court heard the children had alleged they were abused hundreds of times, but in 2010, police closed the case, saying the number of allegations made a police prosecution implausible. Well, before I just see what you say on that, John, as a former police officer, let's bring that statement up on screen. Here we are. They were abused hundreds of times, but in 2010, police closed the case, saying the number of allegations made a police prosecution implausible. Let's remember these 2 youngsters on video, the Hampstead boy and girl, talking about horrific abuse of themselves and other children. Great detail. What happens? Well, the Met Police simply does not investigate the case, and then, hey presto, there's no crime. John, just a couple of words, because we're watching the clock a bit.
Words fail me. What the establishment needs to remember is that we're trying to seek justice by official channels. If they're not careful, they'll be subject to justice by unofficial channels, and if that does happen, they'll have a problem, because let's say a child molester is caught red-handed and killed. Will a jury convict the killers? Probably not, and then it will feed from there. So the establishment have lost their touch. They're not keeping out of our view. We can see you now, and this is going to come to a head eventually, one way or the other.
Thank you. Well, one of the areas of the country that certainly something is coming to the head is in South Wales, and this brings us on to the Bonnie Lewis case. This was part of an original article the UK column published back in October 2008. Bonnie Lewis kidnapped by the state. And we said, as social services get power to section parents as mentally ill, why every parent in Britain should be fighting for the safety of their children and child courts that are open to the full public scrutiny. Now, we reported on this terrible case of kidnapping by the state. One of the key parts of the article, I'll read it because it's probably a little bit small on screen, but the start of it was not to do with social services. It was to do with utter failure, fraudulent operations and a cover-up within the NHS, failure to diagnose a serious illness, removal of a healthy appendix when the hospital had no licence to operate, a cover-up of severe post-operative abscess, excessive prescription of drugs, some not approved for use on children, negligent prescription of oral morphine, incorrect discharge and prescription forms, confused and incompetent hospital referrals, examination and treatment, false denial of Bonnie's pain by doctors and social workers in favour of psychological accusations against the parents and the child herself. Well, what was Neath Port Talbot's response? Well, quick as a flash, they went to the courts for an injunction. So this is how we then stated the case. But I am delighted to say today, Friday the 5th of June 2015, that this lady, Bethan Jenkins, has agreed to an interview. We did this 2 days ago, but this is the first time this interview has been played out. Let's hear what she has to say about the Bonnie Lewis case. Of UK Column Live. I'm going to be joined in a few moments by Bethan Jenkins, the youngish Welsh Assembly member, and she's going to be talking to us about the Linden. Edition of UK Column Live. I'm going to be joined in a few moments by Bethan Jenkins, the youngish Welsh Assembly member, and she's going to be talking to us about the Linden. Can you fix it? Well, it is quite remarkable how the gremlins appear every time we have something of immense significance. We'll just do a little bit of talking in the studio to see whether we can get that interview playing. As I always say, checked and working before we start the transmission, and then something unfortunately happens.
If I could just comment, as I mentioned, Brian.
Please do.
I'm glad to say this time next week you won't be watching this video live because it'll be sub judice. The matter will be before the courts. It is before the courts as we speak. A senior legal advisor, formerly clerk at Swansea Magistrates Court, is making a decision, and we're expecting to be given the slot to lay information and begin the process of a prosecution. It was one of the cases that was considered by the grand jury at Telford, and it appears to be going well. If they try to cover it up, they'll have a problem, and it'll be a personal problem because the individuals will be held to account.
Right, I'm just waiting for a report. Okay, we think we're ready to go on that. Let's try this again.
No.
Okay. Right, I'm just. We have the advantage of no license fee, so we'll just discuss this live. Is it something we can fix in the program?
No,
okay. All right. Well, an extraordinary event there. We don't know why that's happened. We'll carry on through the news, and then we'll see whether we can get that interview uploaded at the end of the news itself. It may require a pause. It is an extremely important interview. So just... Okay. Right, well, what we'll do is we'll switch over to the subject of Scotland. And David, if we've still got you there.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, excellent. I know you've still...
A couple of brief comments before we get on to Scotland. I would point out once again that the problem with the Russians is they keep moving their country closer to the American military bases.
That's right, yeah.
We should bear that in mind. And on the subject of the historic child sexual abuse, not only the Hampstead case, but other things we're seeing in Scotland just now, which I might be able to go into in more in later weeks, shows it's very much not historic. This is current, it's ongoing, it's active, and it's being covered up at the highest levels of the state.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have constantly been moving our audience towards the fact that if you spend time analysing the news, not only in UK but overseas, we find that the policy initially just does not appear to make sense, but if you stick with it, you say, well, it does make sense if the policy is 180 degrees out from what common sense would tell you. You have been doing some really good work in delving into what's been happening politically in Scotland, and this was something that was flagged up for us. It's Alex Salmond's Twitter page, where he's got this banner headline, One Scotland, one country, one police force, one political party. What's your take on this banner that he's using now?
Well, yes, you would have thought if you were a nationalist and socialist party, you would have avoided any headlines that looked a little bit like Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer.
One Führer, yes, yeah.
But we're a third of the way there, which is probably about right. That probably gives you an idea where the government of Scotland currently sits. One Scotland, one party. Nobody in the SNP is allowed to disagree, at least in public, with any party line, with any party colleague, or with any party decision. And we have one super joined-up government. And we're constantly being assured that we are one country represented by one true voice, namely the voice of Alex Salmond and his friends. Diversity, the rich and subversive reality of human existence doesn't really seem to factor into this. We have to toe the line, I suspect. I would point out, though, to people who think this might work, that this has not historically gone well in Scotland, so we'll see.
Okay, well, David, thank you very much for that. While you've been talking, we think we might be able to run the interview with Bethan Jenkins, so fingers crossed. Let's see whether we can do that, and then we'll be able to flow back into talking about Scotland, and that is going to lead us indeed back onto the case of the abuse of children. No? Okay. All right. We're obviously suffering today, or something is against us. David, let's follow this one through. I've got another article here from from the Daily Bell, talking about Big Brother is watching. This really seems to be affecting us all now, that we see the state, whether it's north of the border or south of the border, the state becoming ever more powerful and intruding not just into our lives, it wants to control every element of our lives.
Yeah, this is from America, and there seems to have been airborne surveillance of the American population going on, where people have found that the flight plans of small aircraft hired indirectly by the government involves circling repeatedly over large population centres during interesting points, either riots or public demonstrations and things like this. So what information they're gathering or what exactly they're doing, we're not quite sure, but we are being surveilled. That we know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is, of course, follows on from, as we see this surveillance, onerous surveillance coming in from the state. We've been looking beyond the normal limits of politics to say, well, who are the organisations actually driving the political agenda? And last week you flagged up Carnegie, and we were taking a look at a couple of people in particular, but you found this particular Carnegie document here. I don't like the cover of it. It's to me, it's sinister. But what was the interest of this particular one? I believe communitarian was moved.
Yes, yeah. You mentioned on the show last week that the one joined up government, the Scottish model of government that's been brought through under the radar, smacks of communitarianism. Now, I found this document which mentions communitarianism 12 times in connection with the so-called enabling state. So it very much is seen to be one and the same idea. And this has come from Carnegie UK once again. This seems to be the organisation that's pushing this agenda most vigorously.
So we have these unaccountable organisations who seem to have access to more or less unlimited money. They are the ones formulating a policy, and then that's simply being pushed through our puppet government structure. Well, you got a bit more out of this find. Government as a single legal entity, the plans behind the plan. I'll just show a couple of these and then hand it back to you. But this is to do with policy in the Isle of Man, Tynwald. We have engaged Sir John Elvidge. This is the man, of course, David, who you were mentioning last week. Sir John Elvidge, who was the architect of the Scottish Government model, to carry out a review of our current government structure. So he's brought in as some form of consultant, and then they like what he does so much that Tynwald endorses the report into government as a single legal entity by Sir John Elvidge and requests the Council of Ministers to report by no later than June 2015, because we're going to implement it. And here's the man, but, well, look at this. He's not just changing government in the Isle of Man. He's hopped over to Ireland, and he's now going to, he's now working on an enabling state seminar there. What is this man up to, David?
He's very busy, isn't he? The fact that we're seeing this being extended to the Isle of Man with its ancient form of government and its ancient form of law, which is largely independent, and offers certain protections that are missing in the mainland UK, is all the more sinister. So we're seeing any diversity in how we're governed being swept away, and this one governmental single giant government model being brought in everywhere. The Isle of Man document goes on to outline the named persons scheme in Scotland as an example of the harm that this can do the individual and individual liberty, and as a warning to the people of the Isle of Man what could be coming their way. So John is obviously, yes, going to Ireland and America and China and many other places, proselytising for the Scottish model of government. I would point out it's not Scottish, and it's not really government. What it is something else. It's something more totalitarian than the word government really communicates.
Okay, well, let's add a bit more information for viewers today. We'll bring in this slide here because we've got what a changing UK can learn from multinationals. There's the man again, Sir John Elvidge. This is from Harvard Business Review. But we're now saying, well, not only are we changing the model of government, we need to change it, learning from the multinationals. These are the immensely powerful global corporations that simply do as they please, including manufacture money out of nothing. What they do is for profit. It's not good for the. It's not for the love of mankind. And here we've got this common purpose guru, Sir John Elvidge, saying, well, we need to get government more online, learning from the multinationals. You couldn't make this up, really.
John Harris, who sadly passed away this week, would have been very interested in this, because he was always pointing out how a number of the organisations that we're told are our organisations or are somehow owned by us are in fact PLCs. In fact, a number of the people in politics are themselves private companies for assorted reasons, none of them particularly convincing. And here we see an article written by Sir John Elvidge and someone from the private sector describing the reorganisation of government as basically a relaunch of a company. and doing it explicitly. Yeah. This is a reorganisation of a firm to increase the profits.
And of course, we and many other people have been warning that if we take the NHS, for example, David Cameron and the Conservatives, and it was the same under Labour, utterly lying about keeping the NHS as a public body because it was being privatised while they were lying to the public. And that's the intention for the NHS, of course, is for it to be a pure profit-making organisation. Now,
yes, if you go back to Adam Smith, he was quite explicit on this. He said if you put three businessmen in a room together, they'll conspire about how to rip off the public. The reason they don't, and the reason the private sector is successful and is able to provide a great deal of goods, essential goods, is competition. Is the fact that if people conspire to rip off the public, somebody will then say, well, I will provide a fairer, better service, and he will win in a competitive marketplace. Yeah. It's the competition that keeps it straight. It's a competition that's the barrier to the excesses of what is really the evil of the human heart. If you take that competition away and have a state-sponsored monopoly factored into private sector, the scope for corruption is simply enormous.
The investigation into the Section 151 officer and what's happened to this money is hopefully going to lead in that direction, and some people are going to have to account for it, what they've done. So as I commend you to the two articles, and I invite you to join in research. A lady on the screen has asked Lordy, can we say thanks to Bonnie? I will pass it on. I'm sure she's watching in actual fact. As any person that's suffered abuse, it can be traumatic. Just talking about it, and she's talked about it, she's written about it, she's made statements about it, and she's prepared to go to court about it. And fair play to her. So I'll pass it on, Lordy. Thank you.
Okay, on the basis of third time lucky, we're going to have one more go at getting that interview out. Fingers crossed. Hello and welcome to a special edition of UK Column Live. I'm going to be joined in a few moments by Bethan Jenkins, the youngish Welsh Assembly member, and she's going to be talking to us about the Linda Lewis case. This was the case in South Wales when a young girl was taken away from her mother, and as Linda said herself, that this was the result of unlawful action by the local authority. Now, Bethan Jenkins kindly agreed to come on with a live video link. She's going to be using her iPad. We know that it's a very good image, very clear image, but if the screen moves a little bit, that's the reason why. So, Bethan, are you there?
Hi.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for coming on to UK Column Live. Now, I know that you are very well regarded by the friends and family of Linda Lewis. They're absolutely delighted that you've taken such a deep interest in the case. But you've also been busy in many other areas. You've been working to try and restore the pensions of the Vistian workers. You've also been involved recently in the reopening of a railway tunnel. You're interested in human rights. Just tell our audience today a little bit about yourself and your work in the Assembly.
Yes, hi, and I'm pleased to be invited on this programme to talk about this particular case. I was elected in 2007 for Plaid Cymru in an area which is South Wales West regional seat. So it covers from Bridgend, Ogmore, Neath Talbot, from Swansea to Gower, so it's quite a large area. And within that area I cover a vast amount of campaigns, just as you said, with regards to former Vistian workers. So over 700 are actually live in Swansea, who we successfully managed to recover their pensions from Ford when they initially refused to award those pensions to them due to the funding being transferred to a spin-off company called Vistian. I've been involved in the Rhondda Tunnel campaign to reopen the line between Blaencwm and Blaengwynfi in my area for cycling use, and that's a very exciting campaign. And on a national level, I speak in the National Assembly for my party on sport, culture and broadcasting, so quite a wide brief, as well as sitting on the Education Committee. But my passion is helping individuals and groups in my own region and helping them raise their own voices really through the system. It's not about me sort of doing things for them per se, but helping raise awareness and helping them feel that they're empowered to change things in their own lives. And I think with this particular case, you can see how it's so unjust. And I think that that's something that motivated me to want to get involved and to be in it for as long as I possibly can as an Assembly member to help Linda and to help those who support her.
Well, thank you very much for that. Of course, human rights is there on your web page as a subject of interest, and I think many people would agree that this particular case is absolutely in that area. So tell us, how did you first get to know about the Linda Lewis case?
Well, actually, it was through another area of interest of mine, which was financial education. I was trying to bring a law forward in the National Assembly for more financial education, and I met one of her friends, Richard Day, at a credit union stall in Port Talbot because he works for the credit union. I don't think he'd mind me saying that. And then he just said, well, actually, I've got this, friend, and he started telling me about Linda. But I actually thought, first of all, that it was a work of fiction, merely because I thought it was so fantastical that something like this just couldn't happen to somebody. And so obviously I said, well, yeah, I'll meet Linda and I'll go through the documentation. And so that's what I did with one of my team. I went to her house to do that. We've been back since on numerous occasions. So really, it's just, even though we've been involved for a few months now, it's still very slow in terms of processes and getting access to information. But that doesn't mean that we're going to give up, but it does mean that it's going to be sort of a longer campaign than anticipated, in the sense that, there's lots of things that we have to build a case on, and there's some information that we don't have. And obviously, as Linda and the others have experienced, we may be blocked from time to time on accessing certain pieces of information. I'm willing to help, and I'm willing to do all I can in that context, really, because I think that that's the least that she deserves, really, from somebody in my position.
Right. Thank you for that. Of course, Linda initially came down to see UK column, I think about 8 or 9 years ago. It was a long time ago. She was the first lady who'd ever come to us talking about problems really within social services and child issues. She arrived with a very big, maybe 2 suitcases full of documents. So I do understand the problem with the documents. Just for somebody who's watching or listening today who's never heard of the Linda Lewis case, would it be possible for you to, from your own knowledge now, to sum up what you think what's the key subject to the case? What do you see that's happened that is wrong, that's taken your interest?
Well, clearly, there was issues around the care that her daughter received when she was ill in hospital in Wales, and I don't know what virtue we have in going through that, but that was, I think, the crux of it, in terms of potentially issues there that people wanted to not put out into the public domain, and that may be why there are people who are not being and who are not ready to potentially give us information at this stage. That's something that I have to explore. And then obviously the issue with regards to how then her daughter, when they went to America for treatment, was taken from her and removed from her and put into care by the authorities in this area, which is Neath Port Talbot. And then, of course, leaving Linda in a situation where she was without her child and had to spend, as she is now, her life campaigning to find out what went wrong and why she can't access her child. And obviously then, in the midst of all this, being accused of various things at the time without her knowing, which has now been brought to light that were untrue, and needing to really pin down who was involved, what authorities knew what, and how we can now seek justice in a meaningful way. That's how I see the situation at the moment, really trying to find paper trails and link things up so that we can build a clear case moving forward.
Right, so we're immediately on this key subject of the paper trail, because of course to prove what's happened, to show what's happened, we need evidence. Everybody says, where is the evidence? So this is critical. I understand that you've been trying to get some of the paperwork out of David Michael, the head of legal services at Neathport Talbot Council. How successful have you been when you've asked for information from the council? Are they helping?
Well, I think they're trying to avoid the key questions in the letter that I wrote, which was, can I access all information pertaining to the case? And he's written back to me saying, I've given Linda Lewis and you all the information with regards to the injunctions, but I'm led to believe by Linda and the campaign that those injunctions no longer apply. And so I have to be persistent in going back to the council now, and Linda is fully aware of that action, whereby I say back to the council, no, I'm not asking for information just on the injunctions. I'm asking for all information pertaining to this case, because until we have all information, as you said, we don't have all of the pieces of the jigsaw to build to effectively challenge this at other stages. I'm not saying that we can't, but I say that we need to effectively challenge. So that means that I need to access all the information.
Right, thank you for that. There are two documents which stick in my mind, and I think for a member of the public, these are critical documents. There was Councillor Keith Davis, who had written a letter. This was some years ago, but in it he was actually happy to state, as an elected councillor, that he considered that his own council had acted ultra vires. They'd effectively broken the law. That was quite an amazing letter for a councillor to write, and very brave, I think, at the time. And the other document which is significant is the fact that a letter was written, stating that Linda Lewis planned to kill her child and then commit suicide. And this was actually used in the build-up to court proceedings, but was not apparently disclosed to Linda Lewis's own team. So effectively, from that one document alone, it would appear that information had been deliberately withheld from court proceedings, but that information was not only false, it was clearly designed to undermine Linda's case. Would you be able to comment on either Keith Davis' letter or this so-called suicide one?
I think that's part and parcel of what we need to be looking at now. And you know, when we talk about this issue, I think people have said about reopening cases and so forth, and I think that's where we have to go now, because we have access to evidence that we didn't have before, and so we would need to appeal to relevant authorities to reopen cases in light of that. For example, with the note that you mentioned, and with regards to the allegations against the local authority in question, these were pieces of information that may and would have, I believe, changed the course of how things went at the time. And so really we have those pieces of evidence now and must push for that to mean something in terms of how this campaign moves forward.
Right. Well, what has been particularly interesting for the UK column is that other mothers that have come to see us with similar problems, I'm going to say, with social services, children taken away, but they also speak about their children and other people being told that they intended to kill the child and then commit suicide. What we find particularly disturbing about these, I'll use the word allegations, but there's several mothers who've come to us using this same phrase, that it appears to be being used as a tactic, almost as though it's being taught, if you want to help lever the child away from the parents, this is the phrase that you use. If that is true, that is a very dangerous precedent. Have you, I'm just putting this one in, please feel free to answer or not, but have you got any inkling as to where this letter came from or how it was created? Who came up with the accusation about suicide?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to speculate at this time in terms of on this show. I think it's for me to help, as I said previously, to if the family want to connect with the courts and the legal systems, and to say, look, we have this new evidence and we would like to reopen the case in terms of because obviously Linda was falsely accused, and build the case around the fact that we need to seek justice on that particular level. I haven't personally seen the other issues that you've mentioned, although I have obviously dealt with other issues with social services in my area, and we've also seen reports on Channel 4 News, for example, of parents having to fight for access for their children for various reasons. So, you know, it's not for me trying to avoid the question, but I think that answering the question, but I think what I need to do is to really take all the evidence that I will have, hopefully, and build that case effectively.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Linda also decided that she would take evidence up to the Metropolitan Police because she was deeply concerned with the fact that accusations had been made against her with I'm going to say, with the help of South Wales Police. Part of the story being told about her was that actually she had been convicted. Surprisingly, after she goes to the Metropolitan Police and makes a report, and of course we have South Wales Police apparently implicated in what's going on, what do the Metropolitan Police do? They simply hand the case back to South Wales. This seems to be wrong, and it does raise some interesting questions as to how the police investigate themselves. Can you comment at all on this, or give us your feeling on the Met Police's actions?
Yes, well, I've written to the police about this as well, and they've offered me a meeting with the Chief Inspector at Neath, but it seemed to suggest a sort of informal meeting, and I'm going to be writing back saying, well, I need to have a formal meeting with the police on record to discuss this, because I don't just want to chat with the police. I want it to be recorded and noted, my concerns. So that's my interventions there, for the record and for your viewers. But on the point that you make with regards to the Met, I think, again, this is just so worrying, isn't it? You know, you're trying to bring potential allegations against one element of the police, and then it's passed back.
I think we may have lost you, Bethan.
Well, of course, I think it's very worrying that when Linda took the case to the Met to ask for them to investigate potential problems with South Wales Police, that the first thing they did was to pass it back to South Wales Police. And I think, you know, we should learn from history. We should learn from the current situation with the incidents around the Savile and the abuse of children that is happening, historical abuse of children cases. That we have to react at the time, as opposed to people believing that they can't speak out. And I think that people won't be as likely to speak out if the same police authorities investigating the issue. That's not to say that certain members of the police are, they're different now. There may be personalities that would want to hold others historically to account. I don't dismiss that at all. But we have to have faith in any potential investigation, and therefore that is something that when I request a formal meeting with the police, as opposed to a discussion that I've been offered, that's something that I will be making clear to them when the opportunity does arise.
Okay, thank you for that. One of the questions that I know many people will be interested in, as an Assembly member, what powers do you have to actually press to get answers? Do you feel as an Assembly member that you're fully equipped to be able to ask the questions that you want to ask and expect local authorities or indeed the Assembly itself to answer you?
Well, I'm a backbencher of an opposition party in the National Assembly for Wales. The Labour Party run the Welsh Government, so we have that clear separation, much like you've got the Tory government in Westminster with Labour and now SNP opposition. And so every week we get First Minister's questions opportunities in the chamber of the National Assembly for Wales in Cardiff Bay, which people can watch on Senedd TV. And I have the same parliamentary privilege as Westminster MPs have, apart from the fact that if there's an ongoing and open criminal case, I can't talk about that. So I've used it before when I've, for example, been raising concerns about the operations of open cast mining contractors in my area. I've used that parliamentary privilege before, and I wouldn't hesitate to use it again. But I will say it depends on the pressure that I can bring to bear on the Welsh Government, because of course I am not a minister to actually physically make those decisions. And so I understand from Linda Lewis and her campaigners that they feel they've been let down by Labour in the past. But at the moment we have to face reality and recognise they are the government, but I can work with them in asking key questions in the National Assembly that may then bring this higher up the political agenda.
Thank you, Bethan. Bethan, if you will, just bring your head down slightly, or bring you back into frame. That's excellent. That's good. Just one last question, which is very, very straightforward, is that you are now working, obviously, with Linda Lewis. You're looking into the depth of the case. What outcome would you like to achieve? If you got what you want, you got the answers that you wanted, where would you like to see this case go?
Well, I think that's more of a question for Linda. I think that's something that's really personal to her, because I say that because I think that the word justice is used in the campaign, and rightly so, and that's what she needs, is justice. And do you know what? The most phenomenal thing that I've found in reading all these papers is that nobody's sort of been humble or sort of tried to help her in any way in trying to seek to understand her point of view from a emotional viewpoint. We're not, she's not just a constituent without a family, without a personality, without a life. She's somebody who has lost her child under circumstances that we still don't really know. We know that there was an extradition order from the US, but we don't know who asked for that. We don't know. I've asked the Foreign Office. They say they didn't do it. I've asked the Home Office. They say they didn't do it. The only person I have left to ask is the Attorney General at the time. And so that's a long way round of saying, we have to piece this all together for her sake, so that she can rest and not think that it's her fault, because it's not her fault. And I think that's where, sometimes I don't want to speak on her behalf, that, that she feels that she's had to do a lot of this on her own, and it's good to see that she's had so much support. But it's actually, disheartening to see that it's been so long, and that, there's been that lack of progress on a Welsh government level that she really needs for closure in this particular case. So I think for me it's about getting where they want to getting where Linda wants to get, and as long as I'm an Assembly member, I'll try and do my best to help her.
Well, Bethan, thank you very much. Wonderful words. I know that Linda and her family and supporters will be delighted at what you've said, because it's heartfelt, and I think this is a lot of this case and other similar cases. Linda said to me several years ago, the thing is, Brian, that I think about my daughter all the time. I go to bed thinking about her, and I think about her first thing in the morning. And this is the real thing about these cases. Losing a child, that's a phrase, but the reality of it is very hard. Well, I'm going to say thank you very much for coming on live with us. I'm sorry that we had a couple of little glitches there with technology. It always seems to happen. But thank you for coming, and I hope that we'll be able to give you an invite in the near future to give us an update on progress.
Yes, definitely. When I do have progress, I'd be happy to come back and share it with you. I know it's important that we try and keep, as with other campaigns, they never change overnight. But you've got to be persistent in these things, and I definitely will be persistent.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So there we are, fascinating interview on the Linda Lewis child case with Bethan Jenkins from Plaid Cymru, and how wonderful to see that party now getting involved in digging out the truth on Linda Lewis. Okay, that's it for the UK Column Live today. We will see you shortly. Thanks. Well, there we are. We're going to say once again, thank you very much, Bethan Jenkins, for giving us that interview. And the piece that I really picked up on, I'm hearing it again today, is that Bethan starts out by saying that Linda Lewis came to her with a fantastical story. It didn't really seem believable, but in the documentations, of course, the truth emerged. And then she also says how incredible it was that nobody really tried to help Linda Lewis. She was a distraught mother, had her child taken away. Nobody wanted to listen. So, well, thank you very much, Bethan Jenkins, for coming on with us. And we know that you're going to get a huge amount of support for having the courage to do that and speak out. And as somebody has said in our chat box, how wonderful it is to see a proper public servant. John, what's your take on hearing that interview?
Well, I'm humbled really to see by her whole demeanour. She's an honest public servant. She's a brave public servant, and she's a fair public servant. She mentioned justice. Well, justice is a technical term. It means to recognise rights and punish wrongs. The two things. And those are the things the Queen promised in her coronation. And this lady is the sort of person we need in order to make sure that things are put right. I'm humbled. There's a few little technical things that I could point out to her if I was going to put my sort of amateur lawyer hat on. But what a fine speech, and I believe her.
Yeah. Well, we'll just go north of the border, if we may. David, were you able to hear that? I think you had a secondary device operating.
Yes, I got most of that. Yes, it was very good. One thing that resonated with me was the whole subject of allegations, and allegations which are unfounded and have been made to undermine parents. I was getting feedback from England, actually, that parents whose children have been harmed due to medical negligence within the NHS are facing child protection hearings, because what's happening is that the hospital management and the doctors concerned are accusing the parents of having harmed their own children. They're accusing the parents of child abuse. This has two effects. The parents are far too busy trying to clear their own names, far too emotionally exhausted by that process, and also financially exhausted by that process. And it prevents them coming after the hospital for compensation. And this, I'm hearing that this is becoming a fairly standard practice, just as was suggested there, that the tendency to allege that a parent harbours murderous thoughts about their own child is becoming a standard practice in order to undermine parents when they go to law.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll run on through the other topics that we selected. We've chosen these to go in with the theme. We're staying with you north of the border. This is the Express, talking about SNP snoops to judge parents on spirituality. An amazing quote here from Mr. Fraser, whose job title is Getting It Right for Every Child Health Advisor. I haven't made that up, that's out of the article. Getting It Right for Every Child Health Advisor in the Better Life Chances Unit. This is straight out of 1984. It's about linking positive well-being and positive outcomes for all children, not just the usual suspects, not just those we identify as those in need. And he goes on, every child deserves to have positive well-being. We have had suggestions of different indicators of love, hope, spirituality. I am not wedded. The act is there at the moment, but in a few years, if people feel it's right, they should change that. A very disconcerting mix of 1984 language and a bit of gobbledygook. I'm not sure I understand everything he said, but I don't get a good feeling off it. What do you make of it, David?
A couple of things worth noting. I want you just to momentarily pause and consider how many state functionaries you would be willing to come into your family and judge as to whether you were providing your children with enough hope, and if they decided you weren't, remove the children from that unsafe situation. Is that really power that we should give another human being? Absolutely not. It's also clear that the statements made by First Minister Nicola Sturgeon in Parliament only recently, that this is all about vulnerable children, it's all about protecting children at risk of significant harm, are not in fact true. And that was confirmed only this week at the appeal hearing on the named person judicial review, where the government barrister confirmed that they have moved beyond simply looking after vulnerable children and children at risk of significant harm, and it's something much wider now. It's every child. Every child.
And that leads us in nicely to a scam, free gift vouchers if parents say yes to state guardians. There was a bit more to the story than appeared in the paper about this one, though, I believe.
Yes, this is lovely. This is a nice thing to end on and go into the weekend, because it shows how wonderfully subversive people power can actually be. So the story here is that the government needed to get some parents to come in and tell them how to massage the message, how to get their point of view across to the parents of Scotland that the named person was in fact nothing to be frightened of. In other words, they were looking for some help in overcoming the fact that they're losing the information war on this. They couldn't really get people to give up their time freely to do this, so they decided to put a bribe in. You would get a free lunch and you would get a £25 voucher. So this played badly in the press, but beautifully, and it's a beautiful story. They then found they had a problem because people who didn't think much of the government legislation were phoning in. They were registering for this event, they were getting their £25 voucher, and they were donating the £25 to the No to Name Person campaign. So the Scottish Government, in a small way, was funding the campaign against their own legislation. Isn't that beautiful?
It is beautiful. There's a couple of comments in our chat box. One person has said, since watching the UK column I've learnt to trust my instinct. What they're saying is that their instinct that something was wrong, we're presumably echoing it back. But we'll add a bit alongside the free vouchers. This was your other one, Nightmare of SNP, Stalinist Blueprint for a Happy Childhood. This is quite amazing stuff.
The mainstream press have rumbled this, you know, and I would have to say the Scottish Government must be thinking about putting some sort of reverse or giving some ground on this, because these are the headlines they're getting. And when you're a nationalist and socialist party, you really don't want too many Stalinist or Nazi headlines in the papers, and we're getting them on a weekly basis now. We are seeing the mainstream press reveal a lot of truth about the named person legislation, and it's playing very badly, and people are becoming more and more educated in this.
Right. Let's look at this. This is comment from Aidan O'Neill, who's the QC who's been representing the campaigners opposing the named person scheme. I know this is a very busy view on your screen, but I've done it like this, so if anybody wants to frame the screen, they can actually look at it. But we just highlight a couple of things that this gentleman said. So he's representing the campaigners opposing the named persons scheme, and he's told the court that aside from not being able to opt out, parents have to positively cooperate with the named person or risk being characterised as hostile or non-engaging, which would lead to further state involvement. And I'll just jump right to the end. We're asking the court to look behind the government's rhetoric and see how this is not about protecting vulnerable children. It is about making the state a co-parent. These are very powerful words by a QC, and he's saying you've got to look behind the rhetoric. So rhetoric it is.
Yes, and one other comment he made there, he described the government case as newspeak euphemisms, and that is very true as well. Aidan O'Neill has put the case extremely well once again, and once again is carrying the day in court. It only remains to be seen whether this time that will in some way reflect upon the final judgment.
Okay, David, thank you very much for that. We've extended the programme today because we thought the whole subject was so important. I'm going to thank viewers and listeners for staying with us. So I'm going to thank you, David. I'm just going to give John here the opportunity for a couple of words, and then what we're going to do is end the news programme, but it will be followed immediately by an interview we did yesterday with Kevin Edwards, and he'll be talking about his knowledge of the Linda Lewis campaign as one of the lead supporters of Linda Lewis for many years. But John, what's your view?
Just a quick word. I agree with David. I rarely disagree with David. I can't think I've ever disagreed with David. On the chat box, there's a request for some information about maxims of common law. So I'll just introduce a new concept: 10-minute presentations on popular topics. I'm gifted with a good memory, and I can babble on about a lot of subjects, and I've done a lot of research. So could I ask you email the editor here at the UK column, and he'll pass it to me, and I'll endeavour to produce presentations on the subjects that you ask about, assuming that I've got the information. I think that's an efficient way of sharing what we've learnt over the years. And if I don't know the answer, I'll look it up or I'll ask somebody that knows.
Excellent. Okay. Right. Well, before I end the news today by passing over to Kevin Edwards, can I say thank you very much, everybody who's joined us today, either video or audio. We need your support if we are to continue doing what we're doing. We need people to take up memberships with the UK column. We need people to join as members for the British Constitution Group. With your support, we can not only continue to produce programmes, perhaps we can also upgrade some of our technology, which will help stop some of the gremlins that creep in when we're crunching huge amounts of video data. So a plea from us, if you like what we're doing, we need your support. We also need you to make donations, otherwise we simply can't function. But let's have a look at the interview we did with Kevin Edwards, all helping us to understand child abuse And of course, remember the words of Senator Sivray from Jersey, that all governments like child abuse because it is the means by which they can blackmail people to do their bidding. How true he was. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back Monday at 1 o'clock.